They were worn-out dirt roads with dips and potholes. He made great fun of the drive by gunning it and weaving from side to side, spinning out and turning off the headlights. Everyone was screaming, surprised, but I was screaming for real. Stop the car. Stop. I want to walk. It was pitch black outside, no lights anywhere. I didn't know how far we were from camp, but I knew we had taken the final turn, and all I had to do was walk a straight line to get back. I didn't care. I had to get out. In a stunning impulse of loyalty, Patricia got out too. She didn't want to, and I told her I was going whether or not she joined me, but thankfully her instinct was to not let me walk alone. Patricia was one of my best friends. She had her wits about her, not hugely adventurous, but just enough. We grew up like every other kid in town. Sometimes we rode our bikes around, found some creek to explore, took our spare change to the local store for candy or gum or comic books, lived for the next swimming pool or shady spot in the grass, wondered aloud what our lives would be like, had petty disagreements with some kids and built alliances with others, and wandered home at the end of the day in time for a cheeseburger casserole. That was 95% of every kid's life back then. But Patricia's dad was a professor, and my parents had been in and out of grad school my whole life, so we were also kind of nerdy kids, the types who stayed inside and read books in our rooms most of the summer too. Even on our adventures, we liked our thoughts provoked, we avoided stupid shit, and we didn't suffer fools kindly. My dad was a Presbyterian minister, but Patricia knew how I felt about the Bible, straight up not interested, and about God. Faith, of course, was for fools. But growing up in Bloomington, Illinois, it seemed like everyone was some type of Christian. There was no escape from a little bit of church in my faithless life. Sleeping over at a friend's house on a Saturday night might mean going to church with them Sunday morning. Maybe one day I'd be saved. Until then, I identified as a currently atheist Presbyterian. Patricia was Methodist by default. So when she invited me to go to church camp with her the summer after 8th grade, I shrugged. Okay. I had no other plans. I didn't make any promises to be moved by the Holy Spirit, pray, study the Bible, or be swayed even incrementally in the direction of God. But I would show up, and I would probably sing camp songs. The property where we camped was out in western Illinois past Jacksonville, on a plot of naturally forested, grassy land, with a creek running through the middle and with bordering farms on all sides. Every backcountry road was straight as the pencil of the surveyor who drew up the parcel, and went on like that for miles. Our group was split out into 2 camps on opposite corners of the land, and every day we'd hike from one to the other to join up together. It wasn't a short hike between the 2. It took about 45 minutes each way, through the woods and grasses and crossing the little creek in between. And it filled our time without Jesus, which was a bonus for me. I was a very philosophical person. I just didn't connect with Christian teachings, but I yearned for deeper meaning in life. Patricia and I could have long talks on any topic and be content with open-ended questions. We were satisfied to wonder rather than be indoctrinated, and we enjoyed challenging thoughts beyond the topic of God. That night we trekked over to the other side for dinner and a campfire. We seriously did sing Kumbaya. At the end of the night, someone at the campfire offered to drive us back to the other site. We couldn't all fit in the car, but we must have shoehorned at least 6 of us in the back seat, some sitting on the laps of others, probably none of us buckled in. Even by car, it was a bit of a trek to go all the way up one farm road, cut over on another, and make the final turn back to our home camp. Our driver was just some idiot friend of the camp counselor's visiting for the night. The car door swung open, and we got out. The other kids peered out at us from the crowded back seat with disbelief. Our driver made no attempt to apologize, and no promise to stop terrorizing us, so my decision was made. Someone pulled the door closed, and they drove off into the night. We watched the path of their headlights, and then we realized we had a good bit of road ahead of us. The headlights disappeared into the trees, and our eyes began adjusting to the open road. We were 2 kids from town, born and raised never far from a street light, totally unaccustomed to the darkness of farmland at night. Patricia was terrified. I was pissed. Patricia asked me to keep talking, just keep talking. It didn't matter what we talked about as long as we could drown out our aloneness in the dark, as long as our voices could mask the whispers of whatever ghosts or demons or vicious wildcats might be stalking us from all sides. I was focused on watching the car lights disappear, finding my footing on the uneven road, and keeping Patricia's anxiety at bay with conversation. And honestly, I was equally afraid of unseen predators myself. I was too scared to look back or to either side because whatever stalked us, it was probably right behind, practically breathing down our necks. I tried to train my eyes to that point in the distance where we knew the road turned off toward camp. It would have been a great time for a Hail Mary or two, but I had spent the whole week refusing to share any religious sentiments, and I wasn't about to turn to prayer then. Nevertheless, I could have used some reassurance. We walked as fast as we could, but it would take a half hour or so, with great effort concentrated on the road. I had such tunnel vision, it took me a while before I let my eyes wander out across the landscape. When I finally did, I wanted to stop. I wanted to take it in, but Patricia's anxiety was so high she wouldn't let me, so I kept on. But now I saw, and I fully realized we were, in fact, surrounded on all sides by creatures of the night. As far as I could see, the ground and grasses and trees were blanketed by fireflies, brighter and more densely populated than the starry sky and pulsing with light. Hundreds of thousands of insects, signaling their life, their need, their purpose to be received. It was one of the most spectacular phenomena I had ever witnessed. Not only were we completely safe out on the road alone that summer night, but the miracle of life had invited us to its symphony. And I knew there was more God in that moment than in any camp song or Bible study or affirmation they tried to stuff inside our hearts to fill our spiritual holes. In silence, darkness, and loneliness, the deeper meaning came to us. Looking back on it now, I know I finally made it to church that night. It just wasn't Christianity that called me. It was a mysticism I wouldn't fully recognize or believe in for many more years to come. The impact of that night was never lost on me, and yet it held so tentatively in my 13-year-old bones. It barely resonated as we chattered and hurried back to camp, where it seemed no one waited for our arrival. The driver never came back to get us. No one ever came to apologize. We were left alone to process what happened to us that night. Back in the tent, lying in my cot, when my head finally hit the pillow, I would have sworn myself still a currently atheist Presbyterian, but I was starting to have an inkling. Perhaps I was a little more blessed.